Father, having heard your word read, we now ask that you would open up our hearts and our minds, that you might make it more than words on a page, that you would speak to us what you see fit this morning to bring encouragement, to extend your patience and grace to us, to challenge us potentially. We just pray that your love would pursue us through your word and that we might listen, and that having heard what you say this morning, we might trust you and be the kind of people who put into practice what we've heard. We ask that you would do this in Jesus' name. Amen. So one of the most well-known Bible verses, and this is true whether you're a Christian or a church person or a religious person or not, is Proverbs 16:18. And it says that pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall. Now, the simple translation of that is pride always ends badly. I remember when I was 12 years old, we went on our way to a youth camp in North Carolina, but on the way we stopped at Six Flags over Atlanta. And I've both at 12 and now at 54, about to be 54. I don't like heights. I've never liked heights. I'm not a fan of that at all. And a group of the guy friends that I was with on this particular thing, we were making our way around the park. We were riding mostly kind of not very high rides. And we came to the ride called the Free Fall, which was 10 stories high. And essentially it was like a 2-hour wait, and you wound all the way around this tower. You get to the top of it. They put you in this little 2-person cart. They put you over, then tilt you down so that you're staring straight down 10 stories. And then at whatever point they want to, they just hit some button and you free fall essentially for 8 of those stories, and then it kind of rounds itself out. Well, my friends were talking, we kind of walked around the corner and we see this big ride, and they're like, my friend turned to me and goes, "Hey man, that's free fall. We've been waiting to ride that. Can't you wait to ride that?" And I was like, "No, I cannot wait to ride that. It's going to be awesome." And I completely just faked it. And we waited in line for about an hour and a half. We got to the top of the ride, and the 2 friends in front of us, I'm like sweating. I'm shaking. But the friends in front of us, they get on and they flip that thing like that and hit the button and they disappear. And I was like, nope. I literally turned around and excused myself down the entire line of 10 stories. Excuse me, pardon me, sorry, pardon me. It was awful. I was so embarrassed. Oh. Well, I think most of us have got some stories about how pride maybe led to some form of fall or sabotaged an opportunity, or maybe more serious ones. You can think of ways in which pride has hurt a relationship that you've been in, either because you didn't or did say something probably that you shouldn't have. You didn't become vulnerable in a moment that you probably should have, or maybe you were on the receiving end of somebody's pride and anger of not wanting to be exposed. We probably all have some of those stories. Well, today we're continuing in a series at the table with Jesus, and today we're eavesdropping on a dinner party where Jesus confronts the issue of pride, and it's provided for us by Luke in Luke 14. Now, I want you to try to place yourself at this party. We don't know how many people were there, but we know that it was enough that people were competing for what Luke calls the seats of honor, people close to the host. And in the first century world, it was a shame-honor culture. And so social gatherings were opportunity to either gain honor for yourself or your family, or to at least to protect the honor of your family or yourself and not create shame. So being seated near the head of the table was a public statement of status. It was an honor thing. And not all that different from today. You can think of weddings or banquets that you might attend where they might have a head table where the person who's hosting is seated maybe with other important people or family. Or you could think of maybe going to concerts and you can see kind of the lines that are for the VIP or the sections that are reserved for the VIP. You don't have to be socially intelligent to know which seats communicate a certain preference or privilege. And so Jesus arrives at this party, and he notices that the guests are obsessed with securing the best seats. They're not enjoying other people at the party. They're not engaging in conversation and connection, and so you can tell they're all very distracted by who's going to sit where. They're focused on getting the seat that will give them the most honor, and by the way, making sure that somebody else doesn't get that prize seat. And so Jesus sees straight through to the pride that's ruling their hearts, and he decides to do the difficult but loving thing, which is to say something. He begins with a practical reason not to choose the best seat for yourself. He says, well, how humiliating is it going to be if the host has to move you from a seat that you've picked because they had that seat reserved for somebody else? Instead, Jesus says, take the low place. Then the host might invite you up. Now, would you rather be moved up or down by the host at a big dinner party like that? And then Jesus gives the universal truth in verse 11. He says, for all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, but those who humble themselves will be exalted. Now, I just want you to just settle in. Imagine if you're at this party, all this noise, all this commotion, people jockeying for seats, and then Jesus begins to speak. And he says what we just reviewed that he said. He calls out everyone's pride, and he suggested a better way. And you have to imagine some of the murmuring. I'm sure it was just dead quiet. You could probably hear a pin drop. But then I'm sure there were people who were either thinking or murmuring, who is this? Who invited this guy? Like he's coming in here and commenting on us. You can almost feel the tension in the room. Jesus' words were exposing. They were brutally honest and painfully true. So how was this confrontation? How is this moment at this dinner party? How is this an act of love on Jesus' part? Well, Jesus has a radar for anything that undermines human flourishing and love. He isn't a killjoy who seeks to ruin parties. He's the only one honest enough to see how people are hurting themselves and hurting others and then say something about it. Now, maybe you're not fighting for seats of honor at dinner parties. But where do you experience the same temptation towards self-promotion? Where is it that we get tripped up wanting to make sure that we get what we think we deserve? Maybe it's in the workplace, fear of not getting credit or recognition, or maybe feel like you're going to be passed over for a promotion if you don't assert yourself or promote yourself in some way. And so you call undue attention to yourself at inopportune moments, or maybe you undermine or try to criticize other coworkers. Or maybe think about friendships where you do fear maybe and there's a circle of friends and you feel like you're not sure where you stand in that circle. And so you might feel like you're going to be left out, and so you want to fit in so desperately, and so you try to impress the other friends in the circle. Maybe you do that by dominating conversations, making sure that you're always getting in your 2 cents. Or maybe you do it in maybe a subtle way, but you gossip about some of the other people in the friend group, or you exclude people. You make plans and you say, well, I'm not going to invite that person this time because it seems like they got more attention than I did the last time. All of it is trying to secure the seat of honor. Or maybe it's on social media, which I just think is we all are very aware that oftentimes social media boils down to image management, right? Every post is carefully crafted to project the image that we want other people to have about us, the perception that we want other people to have about us, right? And we do this to our friends, right? So maybe it's vacations or family pictures or cute pets or whatever it is, and it's almost always the perfect version of whatever that thing is, minus the reality. And based on some of the family vacations when our kids were small, I would imagine what I would have wanted to see was somebody post a picture of their kids crying in the back seat with the caption, "We came home early because the whole trip was a disaster." Like, that's the reality, right? Most people aren't posting that. They're posting the perfect sunset picture where the kids are dressed and smiling and act like they're perfectly behaved. And that's fine if you've got kids like that. We don't like you, but that's fine if you have kids like that, right? But we know that's not reality. And yet that's what we try to do. Well, sometimes we can't see the beauty of what Jesus is offering until we first see the ugliness of ourselves. So Jesus holds up a mirror for them and for us and essentially says, This is not the way to find life. This isn't the way to get what you actually long for. And instead, Jesus describes the beauty of a different path, the way of humility. A person secure in God's love and therefore free from constant self-promotion, free to enjoy others, free to serve others, free just to notice and recognize and see other people in their fullness. So what if you came into a dinner party secure in your identity and secure in God's love? Where would your focus be then? It would be on enjoying the people who are there. It would be on connecting and helping others feel accepted and welcome. You would be scanning the room not for the seat of honor. You'd be scanning the room to say, I wonder who's doesn't feel like they're a part. I wonder who feels lonely. I wonder who needs to be encouraged or have a conversation with. You would not be preoccupied with self. See, the obstacle to becoming that kind of a person is pride. So how would we define pride? Well, we often think of pride or associate pride with arrogance or overconfidence. We think of people who are prideful as it's kind of loud and boisterous, and it's very obvious that they're being prideful. But there's a deeper root. C.S. Lewis described pride as ruthless, sleepless, unsmiling concentration on the self. In other words, pride turns everything and everyone into a means to an end, which is to draw attention to me. And there are two forms of pride. The first one is the obvious one. It's the superiority pride, the I'm better, I'm smarter, I'm more deserving version. It refuses to admit wrong and becomes defensive. It often steps on others to maintain its own position. That's the kind of pride that we tend to associate with pride. But the second one is less obvious. It's the inferiority pride. And this pride sounds like, woe is me. I'm not good enough. Well, I'm not worthy. I really don't want the attention. This person avoids risks. They hide their gifts. They struggle with fear and embarrassment. But both forms share the same root. It's a preoccupation with self. That's why they both share a lot of the statements of I and me. Because in both cases, we become attention-seeking missiles, restless and insecure, trying to construct some kind of an identity apart from the identity that God's already given us. And when that identity is threatened, pride whispers to us, promote yourself, assert yourself, secure some honor, try to sidestep and avoid any embarrassment and shame. At almost every stage of my life, I've had to deal with pride, but rarely it's been the socially obvious forms of pride. I mean, don't get me wrong. I can be defensive. I can come off sometimes as a know-it-all. But for me, the most subtle form of pride has been people-pleasing. Wanting everyone to like me or to respect me or to fully understand my motives. So the thing that I struggle to surrender to the most is being misunderstood or judged. If someone doesn't like me or agree with me, I always assume it's because I haven't really been able to explain myself fully yet. That if they just had more information, if they could just let me describe or talk about why I made a decision or why I do the things that I do or why I hold the values that then they would like me. Then they would go, oh, I get it. I understand. Sure. That makes perfect sense. But the truth is, some people just won't like me. Some people just are not going to agree with me. And sometimes they shouldn't because I'm wrong. But regardless, when I allow pride to take over, it becomes about me. And I allow other people's opinions of me to carry too much weight. And then I give too much energy, too much of my mind and my thinking and my focus away to trying to please everyone. So which version of pride do you tend to struggle with? Superiority or inferiority? At the dinner party, people were building their identity and worth through social standing. In this case, it was seats of honor, and it was reciprocal favors. But what are the counterfeit ways that we build identity today? Maybe it's social perception. It's being liked or respected by the people around us. Maybe it's being the one who always knows the answer. Maybe it's virtue signaling, trying to in some way associate yourself with really good causes or things that are happening in the world that you really believe in, but actually other than you trying to identify yourself with it, you don't do anything related to that cause. But you just want to be known for somebody who, yes, I'm for something like that. Maybe it's a picture-perfect family. Maybe it's some version of a marriage that you've kind of romanticized, or you know people respect marriages that are like this. And so you have to try to keep up this perception that your marriage is like that and your marriage is perfect. Maybe it's just general success and accomplishment in whatever field or business or vocation or hobby or gift that you might have, that you just feel like, yes, I know I'm going to feel secure as soon as I reach this standing or people see me in this certain way. And there's even a church version. Being known as the person who always does the righteous or the godly thing, or maybe it's volunteering and saying yes to everything for all the wrong reasons because you want to be known as a good, godly person. But what happens when those props are kicked out from under us? What happens when someone else gets the promotion? What happens when someone else succeeds? What happens when people do, in fact, misunderstand us and there's nothing we can do to change their minds? Or what happens when we fail? What happens when our kids melt down in public or fail out of college or begin to question their faith? What happens when your marriage struggles or someone else gets the credit for something in the workplace? See, those are the moments when it's really tested. Is your sense of identity, worth, and value, are those things that have propped those things up? Are those being taken away and stripped down and showing what's really going on? In that case, you are always going to struggle because it's exhausting. To never fully know that you are secure, to never just fully be at peace with who you are is an exhausting way to live. It's like a jury is constantly deliberating and you're waiting for the verdict. Are you good enough? Are you successful enough? Are you popular enough? Are you fill in the blank enough? It's a never-ending treadmill. And some of your energy banks are draining. They're running low because you're trying to build an identity apart from God. Well, that's what Jesus saw at the dinner party, and it broke his heart. So he offers a different path. Pride is the preoccupation with self to establish an identity apart from God. So humility is the opposite, it is a preoccupation with others that's rooted in an identity secure in God's love. And that kind of humility isn't something you manufacture. That kind of humility isn't something you just has as a goal and just say, I'm going to do this or make this. Instead, it's the byproduct of the gospel, the good news of what Jesus has already done on our behalf. You see, the cross gives us two things that we desperately need. The first is humility. Because when you think about the cross, when you think about what Jesus had to pay as the penalty for my sin and for your sin, what that does is it reminds us that our sin was serious enough that Jesus had to die in our place. And that takes away any form of self-righteousness, which is the fertile soil for pride. But the second thing the gospel gives us is anchoring love. At the cross, God demonstrates a love that conquers our sin, and it forever secures a new identity in him. So Jesus stripped himself of glory and privilege and humbled himself so that we might become beloved children of God. So if you've trusted in Jesus, you don't have to create an identity anymore. It's been given to you. Instead of living like there's a jury deliberating whether you're good enough or smart enough or successful enough, or if your marriage is whatever enough you think it ought to be, or your kids are doing enough of what you think it means to be successful, instead of waiting for the jury to come back in, the gospel has already rendered a verdict. The verdict is in. You are forgiven. You are accepted. You are adopted. You are secure in God's love. And when that becomes more and more real, we become more and more free to turn the focus off ourselves and towards other people that God loves. Imagine how differently we would live if we truly believe that. Imagine the kind of freedom that Jesus is actually offering here to the people at this party. In conflict, we would be quicker to confess and seek forgiveness. In competition, we would do our best without needing to fear that others would get ahead of us. Without resources, think about this. We didn't get to this passage, but right after this particular teaching, Jesus goes on to then give them a little bit of advice about who they should invite to their parties. Right after this passage, he talks about how oftentimes he says, you're planning parties and you're inviting all the rich, successful people. popular people. You're inviting all the people that can pay you back in some way. In other words, you're hosting parties for all the wrong people. He says if we were already secure in our identity, if we were already confident that in God we have everything we need, he says then love would compel you to throw parties for people who never get invited to parties. So think about that in identity as a church, as if as a community we were to embody this kind of settled security in God's love. Then we would embrace the fact that God's put us here to invite people to church who don't show up to church normally. Not pretty people who are already good enough or think of themselves good enough. We'd want to go out and invite people who don't think they're good enough. People who cannot offer us anything in return. It would change the way we use our resources. On social media, we could celebrate others. We could share our weaknesses. We could even laugh at ourselves. So let me ask you, has pride crept into some area of your life? Is there some recent relationship or some place or some environment, whether it's at work or in a friendship group or in a neighborhood or on a team somewhere maybe, where you realize, man, pride has controlled so much of my interactions with this person or with these people? As I look back, if I'm being honest, I've allowed focus of me to control almost everything I've done in that situation. Are you exhausted from trying to become the person you think others want you to be? Or that you think you need to be what you think you need to feel respected and worthy? Jesus is asking us the question today, do you want to be free? Only in the Father's love will you find the rest and identity your heart longs for. And there's a place for you at Jesus' table. It's reserved, it's unearned. It can't be taken away. It can't be given to somebody else. It is your place, and it has come by a gift of his grace. So Jesus invites us to stop striving to create an identity and simply embrace the one that God's already given to us. Beloved son, beloved daughter. Now live in that kind of freedom. That's what Jesus is offering. So I'm going to invite you as Cosimo plays quietly to just take a moment and just respond to God in prayer. Where is it you feel like God's word has spoken to you today? And what's a change, what's a shift that needs to happen? And ask God for that grace to help us.